So chronic back pain is such a major issue, and back pain can come from a lot of different places. So what we're going to be doing today, I'm going to walk you through basically a comprehensive assessment of some of the things that I would do when I first meet with someone who suffers from chronic back pain to figure out what the issue is, where we really need to start, and some of the places that we really need to go in order to fix the back pain and then make it go away permanently. So the first thing I'm really going to look at here is flexion and extension of the spine. So the way I typically do this is I have someone stand, and all of these I would typically prefer to have someone with their shoes off. So you'll see I just have socks on. This is typically how I prefer to do it. So stand with your feet together, hands on your hips, and what I would have someone do is first just kind of arch their back. Now, this can be painful for a lot of people who have chronic lower back pain. So this should be a pretty comfortable movement. You shouldn't have to go back super far, but about this far here should be fairly comfortable for the average person. If it is not, some of the things that I'm focusing on doing are cat-cow and mini cobra progressions are kind of a good place where I want to start to make sure we learn how to get into that flexion here, or I'm sorry, that extension here quite a bit, because that's an important range of motion that our spine should be able to do. The next is the opposite, so flexion. So once again, feet together, knees straight, knees shouldn't be locked out, so you're not kind of clasping your legs perfectly straight, but knees slightly bent. They should stay no more bent than they are right now. Come down, try and touch the ground, touch your toes. So in this position, what is normal is there should be a nice stretch through the back of the leg, maybe a little bit through the calf, nothing crazy. Someone should not feel that going into the top of the glute here, or a pull, strain, or any kind of stiffness through this lower back. If someone does, what I'm looking at is cat-cow. I'm looking at a lot of stretching, so happy baby pose, something on the back where we can pull it in and get some stretching through there and then strengthening through that range of motion, maybe with something like a Jefferson curl. So we got front to back, now we're gonna do side to side. So the next thing I'm gonna do, once again, feet together, standing up nice and tall, just hands right down by the side. I'd have someone go to one side and go down as far as they comfortably can and let me know what they feel. Now, if someone has issues with QL, maybe some like a really bad mid-back tightness, they will feel a pulling usually right around here. So depending on where it is, QL is a huge culprit of this. The QL is kind of like right in the middle of your back. It's a long muscle that goes all the way down here, kind of in between your spine and kind of like just below the lat here. So the QL is a really common one, and I'm going to go over another QL test here in just a little bit. That's also a great movement to do. So I'm looking at one side, seeing how that feels, and then I'm looking at the other side. One, I want to know, is there any pain, tightness, pulling side to side? I'm also going to be looking at, can they come down the same amount on each side? So come down, let's say you can touch like right in the middle of the knee. On the other side, maybe they can only come down to just above the knee or a couple inches above the knee. That's going to signal some definite imbalances between the sides of our backs and could be causing a lot of pain. Probably someone would feel some pulling or tightness on one side or the other if that is the case. So that's kind of what we're looking at here. So we got front to back, we got side to side, so now we're going to do some rotational work. So the windmill is usually my preferred method of doing rotational and seeing what the rotation looks like. This is going to tell us thoracic mobility. This can also tell us a little bit in the shoulder and upper back, as well as actually being able to come down into pushing the hips back, coming down all the way to the ground. Now, if this is too difficult or painful, I can also do a basic thread the needle in a quadruped or all four position. I have plenty of videos on thread the needle, so feel free to go check this out if you can't do the windmill. So for the windmill, feet are going to be just outside hip width apart, right about hip width or just outside. Arms start wide, just straight out in a T position. You're gonna come down, opposite arm to leg, push the hips back, both of the legs should stay straight, all the way down to the ground if that person can, and look up towards the pinky, and come on up. Once again, I'm looking here at both sides, all the way up. So the first thing I always ask, what do you feel, if anything? Do you feel a stretch anywhere? Do you feel pain, pulling, tightness? If the answer is generally, no, I don't feel a lot, great. Then I'm looking at, can they come down once again the same way on both sides? Was it the same? Was it as easy on both sides? Could they come all the way down to the ground? Or could they maybe only come down this way, in which case they're probably not rotating all the way. So with this one, this is really common. People often have issues with this one. Reason being is, even if you don't have a ton of back pain, maybe just a little bit of stiffness, we don't do a lot of rotational work, most of us, in our day-to-day lives, or even in our workouts. So this is something that's really important, especially if you're sitting all day and you get pain through your shoulder blades or tightness through kind of your mid-back. Doing some of this rotational work can be really, really valuable. And this is a test that most clients fail. So this is a huge one that I really look at when it comes to chronic pain. Okay, so we got front to back, we got side to side, we got rotational work. So that's going to cover a good portion of our back. So now there's two other things that I'm really looking for. One, I want to look at their ability to pull back their shoulders and their shoulder blades, and then we're going to look at the hips. So you can see I have shelves here, but ideally you want to be flat against a wall here. So this is the wall test. Once again, I have a ton of videos on this on my page on YouTube and Instagram. Feel free to check them out. So I'm just going to kind of talk you through it. So feet stay together. Feet should be about 8 inches, 8 to 12 inches away from the wall. There are several points of contact when we think about a wall test. So feet are away from the wall. Then points of contact with the wall are the tailbone, mid-back, upper back, so kind of like the top of your shoulders here. There's a little knob at the base of your skull right here. That should be touching. And then shoulders, elbows, wrist, fingertips. So you would be pushing everything back against the wall. And then the test is you pull in your belly button, pull in towards your spine, and you're trying to press everything as far back against the wall as you can. So common things that I see, there's an excessive arch through the back that can't be pushed against the wall. It doesn't need to be perfectly flat, but it should be pretty darn close to it. So excessive arch, this is going to signal a lot of things. A lot of it has to do with posture. The lower back is just receiving a lot of pressure throughout the day. We work a lot on core and that big tuck, so glutes, a lot of ab and tucking motions especially. The other thing, two other major things I see, this little knob in the back of your head, you can't get it back. Now keep in mind, when you push this back, you should look like you have a really significant double chin. Like you should really have to push your chin back. If you're trying to go like this, that's not gonna work. You gotta really push it back. Once again, you'll have a little bit of space here in the natural curve of your neck, but you should be able to get that little knob against the wall. So if that's not the case, that's someone who has an excessive forward head. Part of that can be the shoulders, but it's typically the head. That can lead to a lot of neck pain and upper back pain. What we're doing for that is we're really focusing on good posture, shoulder blade retraction, shoulder mobility, and really being able to get that head back. And a lot of that has to just do with day-to-day life. Eating, working at a computer, looking at your phone, you're looking forward the whole time instead of bringing it closer to you, your head comes closer to everything. The last thing I see is the elbows, wrists, and the fingertips not being able to be flush. And what usually happens is instead of being back like this, it's usually kind of forward and you go like this and the wrist curve. This is super common. So this has a lot to do with individual, and usually one side's better than the other side too. So this has to do with shoulder blade mobility and a lot of times unequal strength between the shoulder blades. It also has to do with shoulder rotation and being able to actually get the shoulders back and pull the shoulders back. So think handcuff with rotation for shoulder rotation. For shoulder blade retraction, I really like scapular push-ups. There's a ton of work that can be done. Single arm rows are really important. But those are the two biggest things. And I'll say the two biggest tests that I see the most out of are the windmill and the wall test. Those are so valuable. Those are things you can easily do yourself. You can take a picture of yourself while you do this, take a video, and you can see the natural imbalances of your own body, whether you have pain or not, but especially if you do have pain. So the last place I really look is we're looking at the hips, and there's kind of a follow-up test to the hips if I see an issue. So for the hips, if the hips are really tight, whether we can't internally or externally rotate, or they're just generally tight, that can cause a lot of pulling through our lower back. And this is extremely common. If you've watched me on Instagram for a while, I am a huge fan of the 90-90. The 90-90 is like my go-to favorite move when it comes to the hips. I use it for my own warm-ups still. I use it on almost all of my clients' warm-ups. I'm a huge fan of this. So I'm looking at the 90-90 when I'm looking at hip mobility, and I generally do internal rotation when I'm looking at this test, because usually external rotation's okay, not always. Generally though, internal rotation tends to be a huge problem for most people. So in this 90-90 position, so once again, I have tons of videos on this. So front leg is a 90-degree position, back leg is at a 90-degree position. You want to line up your back leg with your shoulder, and the hip should be in a nice line, and then you should have a straight line down through your fingertips to your knee. You should be sitting up nice and tall. Now, this might be difficult enough, just being able to sit up. So a lot of people have to lean here, or they're just really uncomfortable in this position. Obviously a sign that hip mobility needs to be worked on. So in this position, fingertips down are totally fine. Just make sure the shoulders relax. It shouldn't be hiked up. So press both knees, both feet into the ground. Then you come forward until you really start to feel a stretch specifically through this back hip, and then you lift the back foot up. So it's a lot to think about, but when you lift this back foot up, one, if you can't get it off the ground, that's an issue. That's something we need to address. A couple inches off the ground is pretty normal. You can see I can get mine off a couple inches here. The actual range of motion though is quite large. You can see how my leg is actually able to internally rotate quite a bit. I don't have the strength to get it all the way up there. I can get it off the ground. That's always the goal, is to get it higher and higher. But generally I'm looking for someone to be able to just get it off the ground while keeping a really good position here. Now, if someone feels it in this front knee more than they do the back, that's external rotation. That could have something to do with the glutes being super tight. So if someone fails this test or is shown to have some hip issues, I always do a follow-up test for the glutes to see where the glutes are, whether they're active, underactive, overactive, and if they are equal in nature. So once again, I'm going down, making sure that someone can bring this back foot up even just a little bit, hold this position, come back up. They should be able to hold for about 5 seconds at a decent height. Like I said, an inch or two off the ground is totally normal. That's passing in my book. So the last thing I will look at is a single leg glute bridge. So down on the ground here, press the back flat into the ground. One foot should either be up or can be across. Hands on the hip bones, hips should stay nice and level. Pull the belly button in towards the spine, big crunch, you're squeezing, but breathing. Bring the heel in as close to your butt as you can get it, pressing up through the middle and back of the foot primarily, up into a bridge, hold for a few seconds, and come on down. Now, then I do obviously the other side, See how that looks. Good to go. So what I'm looking for in the glute bridge position, does someone have more feeling, do you feel that glute bridge more in the quad, the hamstring, or the glute? It should primarily be in the glute, little bit of hamstring, totally fine. Not through the quad. If it's through the quad, we really need to work on posterior chain strength. Super, super, super important, especially when we're talking about chronic back pain. So that's a huge indicator. We need to work on glute strength, posterior chain strength, usually one side at a time, because usually there's going to be an imbalance. The other thing, if someone can't get off the ground, that's obviously an issue, and a lot of times there's a discrepancy between the two sides. That's another thing that's really important to look at. We need to start with a lot of unilateral training, unilateral mobility work, to make sure that both sides, we can get both sides fairly even. I don't really expect any client to be at 100%. I don't think any of us can be at 100%, but we can be pretty darn close to that, especially when it comes to our strength training. We should have pretty similar strength between our sides. So I hope you found that helpful, and go start doing your tests and we can see where your back pain is coming from.